All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Big day today. We've got our first guest speaker from across campus. We're grateful to Norman Coach for showing up today and enlightening us. All right, and we are, believe it or not, we're in the wrap-up week for the first unit of study. So way to go. We're moving right along. So this is the unit in composing in context. And I think we've had a pretty good run so far, and this week you'll be doing some wrap-up activities. So I do want to make a quick pitch to you guys. We really need you to make sure you put your iClicker in a backpack or something that you always bring to class, because that's going to eventually create a train wreck for us if we have to do too much at the front end. So I know most of you guys are handling that, but just make sure you treat it like your one card or something, so that when you come to class, it's like, you know, your car keys or something. Like, you got to have it. So I just want to make that little pitch. So anyway, here's where we are. It's wrapping up the unit. I'm just going to do a few slides and then turn it over to Norman. So we are giving you guys these practice questions, right? Because we're going to have a midterm. I will be posting a study guide as well. So I'm making questions. Now remember that all of the questions for the midterm and final are coming out of these presentations. So that's the only content stream feeding the exams. So it's pretty important stuff. So I will send you a full list, but I want to keep doing the practice test questions so that when we get there, it won't be brand new, right? You'll get an idea. Make a few announcements and just a couple of brief connections, and then we'll move on to Norman's presentation. So let's see what we got here. Okay, I think we're ready to do this. Is the first question. Okay, so get them iClickers out. And is it started, Greg? Okay, so you have the usual 30 seconds. Oh, there we go.
I missed it.
Yeah, let me move that out of the way. Okay, muy bien, very good. Okay, so the correct answer is C, principles and method, and that's what we're trying to stay in touch with, right? So when you're listening to all these presentations through the term, you're trying to extract principles so you can apply them, change them, monkey with them, you know, use them in your own work. That's the idea. So we're looking for principles and working method. You know, if you pick up some savvy and smarts and money along the way, that's good too. But principles and method is what we're after. Okay, next question. Looks like this here. Okay. Yeah, way to go. You guys are doing good on these. So these are the kind of questions you'll see. So the correct answer is C. So a polysemic word or concept is one that retains its meaning across a variety of contexts and scales. So this is an important piece of terminology for this course. So polysemia is sort of one of those contemporary, you know, buzzwords or whatnot that is a pretty important tool for you to have. So way to go on the questions. Okay, so for announcements, I wanted to let you know that that my point in introducing you to having made a Google site and all that stuff was actually, it's to get that e-portfolio done. It's just for your student work. It's totally understood that you're going to need something different to have a professional portfolio. We just want to get you in the groove of having a web presence for work purposes. So it's much more about, for me, introducing you to a workflow platform. It's almost like having a studio in the sky, right? So these things, blogs, websites, those kind of things are sort of like studios, and then you can do some meaningful online work in those spaces. So that's what it's about. I think I mentioned in my little blurb I have about 50 websites, right? 50 Google sites, right? Because if I ever go somewhere to give a presentation or I have a project I'm launching, I immediately create a website. It's really like a project management tool as much as it is a website. So you have to kind of change your mindset a little bit. If you're thinking about, oh, this is my website, like the one and only. In Google Sites, it doesn't really work that way. They're very easy to create. You can create them for multiple purposes, keep them private, share them selectively, etc. So it's a very useful thing to explore. It's not going to be for everybody. I don't think any of the tools you're introduced to in this class will necessarily stick. But you get the idea, right? Some of these things are important to have. So that's that. I already said number 2 there, that basically anything said from this stage or this podium is a fair game for exam questions. So what you're doing this week, just to give you a quick preview, is that you're going to be sort of weaving the strands that you're learning together. This is technically the reflecting week. So that's where you kind of pull it together, put it in your own words. That's a hugely important part of your learning process. If you don't do that, you basically don't learn, because you have to perform an active translation. That's why I'm having you write this reflection. You need to pull this together, say in your own words what the heck you got out of this unit, and what you think is worthwhile and what not also. But that's the process that makes it your own. So that's what we're doing this week. And then next week we open our second unit of study on composing and design and visual art. And we'll have a couple of guests, Will Taylor from the Visual Arts program, and then our very own brand new Chancellor, Lindsay Bierman, to talk about composing and architecture. So a couple of guest presentations. You'll get me the first presentation again next Tuesday, and I'll kind of introduce the topic. There's going to be some readings and stuff, but that's how the lineup looks. Connecting a few threads, okay? So again, what this unit's been about is composing in context, and I know I showed this slide before, but I want to briefly show it again here, that basically we're looking at being able to put texts or topics in context is a hugely important intellectual skill. So it's kind of one of the things that makes you educated. If you can actually take anything and put it in multiple contexts, you actually understand it deeply. So it's an important act. So this is a very important unit. So we've looked at composing in the context of our own university campus, which is this amazing place that does this first generation multimedia forever. The context of everyday life, right? So these are things I want you to be meditating on as you move through your daily life, how many times you're actually consciously doing composing. And then this varying degrees of mindfulness changing the nature of the composition. So I'm going to talk a little bit more next week about some other contexts, just to sort of touch on them. The kind of anthropological one, ways of knowing as a kind of human context for composing. There are psychological contexts, which I'll say a little bit more about next time, and there are also physiological. I've mentioned that perception itself is in very many ways an act of composition. You are assembling this scene right now, perceptually. You're composing it. And then the last one being the context of the idiosyncratic self. One's own chosen field, and giving that field a personal spin even, and then maybe a spin on top of that spin to make you a totally unique composer in your own field. That's probably what we're all about here. So that's why we're having guest speakers and those kind of things to tell us about that context, the context of the self. So again, this is the substantive inclusion of guest artist speakers. This is not like a frivolous thing. This is the centerpiece of this course. This is the content. Okay? So there's that aerial view of our of our very own campus. So those are kind of like the 7 zones of composing on campus, right? So normally we have 5, but what I've got here is dance, design and production, drama, film, liberal arts, music, visual arts. So I want a full menu up there. All these places are hotbeds of composing using different mediums. So today we're going to hear from Norman Coates, who is the, I guess it looks kind of like a tent, right? So Norman has his tent pitched in design and production, lighting designer, very articulate guy. Like I've said before, what I can't wait to do is hear these presentations myself, but I get to sit down and learn from the great folks on our campus. So this is a great day for me. And so please join me in welcoming Norman Coates.
So let's get started. If images are wonky, I'll shift them around a little bit. So I'm going to talk about composing in light. I realized that as Bob spoke today that I'm actually sort of going to be this crossover candidate perhaps, because I'm also going to talk about design and visual design. And I'm a lighting designer, so I see things in light. And a little bit about me. I'm Norman Coates. I've basically been in show business for 50 years. Not continuously. Not all of that has been as a lighting designer. So obviously I started very young because I'm only 52. But I started earning my living in lighting design in 1976. And I've been paying the rent that way ever since, if that matters really. But a little bit of background about me. Because I think context is everything. I think you develop everything you do based upon all kinds of things. I grew up in a little tiny town in Pennsylvania called Bridgeport. Obviously, Google has stabbed it with a really big red balloon. And my address was 48 East 4th Street, Bridgeport, Pennsylvania. It was about 20 miles west of Center City, Philadelphia. And that's the little town itself. It wasn't much bigger than this campus. We had a police force that was half the size of our police force on this campus. They had 2 cars. One of my best friend's father was the chief of police. His name was Orfeo Caglialori. So that gives you a little hint about the town. It was a town made up completely of first and second generation European immigrants. Italian, Irish, Polish, Ukrainian, Greek. So it was a really incredibly diverse neighborhood. The little blue line up there is the Schuylkill River. I used to swim in that. We used to call it the Schuylkill, and the Schuylkill Expressway ran into Philadelphia. I would get out of the water and my hair would be crunchy. So I'm not sure what pollutants I swallowed, but I'm sure there were quite a few. So I also grew up in that house. The one that has the whiter paint on the porch, that was the house I grew up in. And in my senior year in high school and my first year of college, I lived on that 3rd floor. I got that whole 3rd floor. I turned one wall of the 3rd floor into a graffiti wall. All of my friends could come in with magic marker and paint on it. I don't know who we sold the house to, but I'm pretty sure that unless they painted that over 20 times with kills, that magic marker is still bleeding through that paint. Some interesting things were said on that wall. But I think what's interesting to me is that my memories are all of light. And my world's put together in 2 ways. It's put together partly by my memories of light, and then how I exposed myself to other things that then influenced and helped me understand more about light and the world and life. And that's exposure. And exposure is intentional. Goethe says that you should expose yourself to one good piece of music, one good book, one good piece of art every day. Every day. And that's the simple early computer idea of garbage in, garbage out. If you're taking in good art, you're eventually going to put out good art. If you're taking in garbage, well, what do you got to put out? So, light, all of my early memories are based upon light. here's this ambiguous kind of photograph of, is it sunset, is it sunrise, what is it? One of my early memories was I had been through all the normal childhood sicknesses in a really quick period of time. Measles, chicken pox, all those things you all don't have to deal with. And I had this horrible fever one day, went to bed early, got up, came down, the fever had broken, I felt better. I walked outside, my parents were sitting in our backyard, our tiny backyard, and there was this really wonderful sort of golden time, that time when the sun is just set, the sky is that brilliant, beautiful color. I had no clue whether it was morning or evening. I thought it was the next day. I thought I'd lost a whole day of my life. And it was like, oh, hi, Mom, hi, Dad. Wow, I was asleep for a really long time. I lost a whole day. And they laughed at me and said, no, it's still Tuesday. And I was like, oh, wow. So the emotional rush of all of those thoughts at once in an 11-year-old was like, oh, wow, I didn't lose a day. I get to play tomorrow. I only lost today. And it's a weekday, so cool. But that kind of like that feeling of time there at that sunrise or sunset are so very similar that emotionally it was like I was lost. And then I was grounded. And then it opened up again. But it's this really interesting time. It's a lot of people's favorite time of day. This is not where I grew up in any way, shape, or form. I grew up in, obviously, southeastern Pennsylvania, in a worn-out, old industrial town, all blue-collar workers. But on a day like this, with the clouds like that, and I was standing up in the park, and the park, the park in my town was probably the highest point in the county. And I was looking over the town across the river called Norristown. And it was a steely blue sky like this. And that was the moment that I knew that I was not going to spend the rest of my life in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania. And in fact, somewhere, I was probably 12 years old, maybe 13, I'm going to live in New York City. And in fact, I did for 20 years. But that day, that steely blue sky, every time I see one, triggers that same emotional response. Exposure. Well, obviously, I've zoomed in on this a little bit. Anybody know the painting? Night Watch, Rembrandt. So when we expose ourselves to good art, and especially in lighting design, I think I can zoom out a little bit. We're exposing ourselves to lighting. Rembrandt, very theatrical. When I look at this, I see where the light's coming from. I see there's a focal point of the composition. I get all these ideas. It stirs up in me things that I can then evoke. I just did an opera 2 or 3 years ago called The Crucible. Takes place in about the same time period as Rembrandt was painting. The director said to me, I want it to look like a Rembrandt. It's like, okay, I can do that. Because I knew what Rembrandt's looked like. I know the emotional context. I know the feeling. I know how he sets his plate, how he puts together light and shadow and composition. So what I take in, every piece of art I take in is something that I can then consume and think about and then put out with my own twist on it, with my own ideas, with my own abilities. But that idea of seeing good art, lighting designers start with Rembrandt, Vermeer, and then move on from there. But what we have to deal with, sometimes I hate computers. Don't we all? As a lighting designer, we have these 4 things. I really want to do the Roger Daltrey thing. Next time I'll do it bigger now that I know I can get away with it and the thing won't fly off. So, see, context. I guess you know when I grew up. Qualities of light. There are basically these 4 things that I have as a lighting designer that I can manipulate. They're really simple things. And they're the basic tool sets that I use to structure whatever I'm going to do. No, it's not ideas. It's intensity. I can control intensity of light. I can make it from as bright as I can possibly make it given circumstances, or I can make it absolutely no light. I just did a production of Wait Until Dark where I spent, 2 hours making the theater get a perfect blackout. Not one little bit of light leaking anywhere from any place, under a door, through the edge of an exit light, anywhere. It was really fun. When we got to that moment in the play, it was absolutely black. You were in a room that had zero light in it. The scene went on for like a minute or so. There were some people that had visceral reactions. There were 2 people who had to be taken out because you begin to hallucinate a little bit. And then all these people are screaming. And some people had panic attacks. We got the room so dark. But all of a sudden, every audience member was into their head. But I have intensity. So I can control intensity. I can make it bright to dark and everywhere in between. I've got color. And color obviously means that I can layer color on top of objects, make them change how they appear, heighten them, decrease them, do all kinds of manipulation using color. And I have direction of light. And I put this up here because this actually, interestingly enough, does both, as a drawing, does both what you can think of as intensity by the value scale down the bottom, but also direction. You see the highlight on the sphere. You see the shadow. Max Reinhardt said that in theater, it's shadow is as important as light. Whenever I place a light in a show, and I'm going to use that light, I'm really thinking about where I'm placing the shadow. Because shadow is how I understand what your face looks like. It's how I understand how far you are from me. My whole world is wrapped around the idea of the contrast between light and shadow. It's how I see. It's how I understand depth. It's how I understand the world. It's how the world becomes plastic, three-dimensional. And the last quality we have is movement. And hopefully this may or may not work depending upon our internet. It's working. It's dark now. It was bright. This is the boring part that builds us. This is a project we do every year in the lighting program called Photonapalooza. Last year it happened in the Thrust. And this was one of the projects by the students. First week of intensive arts, you'll all see an invitation to come to this year's project. So we started out with some brightness. We killed the lights. We got dark. He's building the lights back in. He's adding projectors right now. This is an in joke, which you may or may not get. He's showing control consoles. And all those little things that you can barely see are actually buttons that would be on the console, and he's putting those onto a screen. Now he's adding color. So he's manipulating intensity, he's manipulating color, he's manipulating direction constantly. Now you see the moving lights moving. They have texture in them. And what he's moving is he's moving all of those other qualities. He's moving intensity, he's moving color, and he's moving direction. That's what lighting designers get to move. That's movement in light. So we could watch this whole thing, but I'm going to move on. I know you really want to watch it, but you'll just have to come to Photonapalooza this year. So I'm going to specifically talk about one project. This is a production of It All Fit On, The Glass Menagerie, that I did a few years ago at Triad Stage. And I'm going to talk about the process of taking those tools, everything that I ever learned up to the point of doing this production, and how it gets influenced into putting together what actually goes on stage visually. Obviously, if you're dealing with drama, you start with the script. If I'm dealing with opera, I start with the music. If I'm dealing with dance, I start with the movement. If I'm dealing with architectural lighting or public art lighting on a building, I start with the building. The building has a story to tell without me. And first I have to learn its story. I have to learn the script story. I have to learn the choreographer's story. So if you look at the script, Tennessee Williams wrote some interesting little introductions. Please just fit, please. Okay, first he says, being a memory play, the Glass Menagerie can be presented with unusual freedom of convention. Ooh, I hate realism. Theater's not real. It's a bunch of actors on stage. Dance isn't real. I'm not at a club dancing myself. I'm watching. So he's already freed me from the confines of trying to be realistic, unless I was doing a Strindberg play or an Ibsen play. And even those we don't do realistically anymore. He also told me very clearly, he says this in his introduction, lighting in the play is not istic. Oh, wait a second. The lighting in the play is not realistic. Ching ching. Thank you, Tennessee. So of course, if we knew a little bit about Tennessee Williams, we knew he was actually at the point of breaking all these conventions, and we know more about his life, and we read about his life. But in that introduction, he also says, it's all about the scale, isn't it? It's always about the scale. A certain corresponds to light in religious paintings, such as El Greco's, where the figures are radiant in the atmosphere that is relatively dusky. So he sort of expresses this idea, this is the lighting he wants. Now, if you were a young lighting designer, you decided to Google how other people achieved this idea of dusky light, you're going to find all these very academic papers about what El Greco lighting is and what he means by this. Well, as far as I'm concerned, he means by this that I have the freedom to take this El Greco and do with it as I will, because he already told me that I'm unconstrained and that it's not realistic. Anybody know this painting? Other than it's El Greco. Yeah.
I don't remember the name.
Ah!
Yeah.
It's St. Peter.
Yeah. We went over it in color and design because talking about lighting and incorporating it.
Yeah.
Certain lighticians and all that will try to go and copy what he does on film sets or something.
Right.
Commercial editors.
So I'm in the opinion, though I don't copy. I'm in the opinion of what Picasso said was that great artists steal, good artists copy. I steal the idea. I steal the principle behind it. I steal the emotional context of it, and then I make it my own. And I think you'll see in a minute that in making it my own, it got a little strange. But as a lighting designer, you have a whole lot to consider. So we already talked about the tools, right? The intensity, all those basic principles or physical attributes that light has. I read the script. I analyze the script. I talk with the director, the set designer, the costume designer, in this instance, the projection designer, the sound designer. We all sit down and talk about the play and throw ideas out. And some people call it spitballing. You know, it's like you throw spitballs till one of them sticks to the wall, and that's the idea you use. I'm not really fond of that metaphor. If we play spitballing, I'm just going to make wetter spitballs and make sure mine stick. But there's a lot of brainstorming going on and a lot of collaboration. Theater and lighting design is a lot of collaboration. And one of the most difficult things for young lighting designers is to really learn to have a voice in those collaborations and how to talk about light. Because light's everything to me. And whether you know it or not, light's everything to you. Your first sense, and in fact, 90% of the information you get as a human being comes from sight. And you can't see without light. So let's just start there. But it's the most difficult thing to talk about because it's not physical. It's not metaphysical, but it's not physical. I can't see it, I can't taste it, I can't smell it, I can't really touch it. I can feel the effect of it in heat, but so it becomes hard to talk about. So you actually have to build up an interesting vocabulary based upon art images, ideas, and the other thing you have to do as a collaborative artist is you have to be able to get into the head of whoever you're collaborating with and understand how they think so that you can talk into them in their ideas and their terms and express your ideas to them in their way that they're going to understand. So we research and collaborate with all of those. Then as a lighting designer, you also have all these physical constraints. Size and shape of the theater. What is the lighting inventory if I'm in a regional theater? What's the budget if I'm in a commercial theater? How much money? So, and somebody's probably already told you this, but basically everything comes down to time and money. And one other thing, on this campus it comes down to time, money, and parking. But in the theater it comes down to time, money, and space. So parking is the same thing, right? So how much space? What's the space look like? How much time do I have? What's my workforce? Who do I have helping me work on this? What are their capabilities? Because that's going to influence what my work's going to look like, and I'm going to shape my work based upon all of these things. So once I've determined a lot of these things, I go to this place. I call it Blue Sky. It's really not such a good term to use necessarily because its origins come actually from some people long ago who were selling, I forget if it was commodities or stocks or futures that actually had no value. So it's like looking into the vast emptiness. But I call it the blue sky because I have to go somewhere where there's nothingness. Yeah, this might sound a little Asian, it might sound a little Zen-like, it might sound, but the idea is that once I have the idea of the play, I've read the play, I've consumed it, I've absorbed it, I've thought about ideas, I've talked about it with the director, I've got to go someplace where I'm not thinking about it. I'm thinking about anything else but it. I need to just wash my brain for a while. I sometimes call this the incubation period, but it's a place where I can let everything that I've thought about simmer, if we want to use a cooking analogy. But you know, your brain doesn't stop working, ever, unfortunately, or fortunately. I don't know about that one, but if I put something away in a compartment at the back of my brain, it's in that compartment, but my brain's still firing on it, subconsciously. It might pop up in a dream all of a sudden. It's like, holy crap, I got the answer to this scene. It might pop up in the middle of the day when I'm walking down the street. It might pop up when I'm looking at a piece of art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, or at Sika even, or anywhere else. It might happen on a bicycle ride that all of a sudden all the things fall into place and I know what I should do. So I go to this blue sky place for a while if I can. One of the things we don't have a lot of anymore is time to go to blue sky because we're inundated all the time, but there's ways to do it. Once I've done that, I've got to sit down and really actually decide how I'm going to use the intensity and brightness, which I have in my mind, but I've got to put it on paper so other people can understand it. So at some point, I compose a lot of theatrical lighting instruments, which I think of as brushes, because all of them have different sized beams and different qualities of brightness and color temperature and all these other things that get very complicated and technical and crafty, which is what you learn here at school. But I wind up having to do this very simple, basic kind of thing of getting into a drawing and understanding the drawing and understanding the space virtue of a drawing and understanding what my lights will do in there. So this is a section of this theater. And this is like if I cut the Triad stage in Greensboro in half and looked at it from the side. And there's all these heavy black lines hanging down here. Well, one of the things we decided early on in this was that we didn't want the glass menagerie. I'd done this play before, so I brought a lot to the table. We didn't want the glass menagerie to be a little table with little tiny figurines this big. Because I'm sure anybody who's halfway back in this theater right now would have no idea what figurine I was holding right now. All they know is I was holding a piece of glass. I don't know if it's a unicorn, a dolphin, an elephant, a little statue of Norman Coates. I got no idea what the hell it is. So we engaged a glass artist, and they actually built shapes that floated above the stage as the glass menagerie exploded out over the room. I went, oh, that's cool. I'm going to hang all kinds of different sized light bulbs inside that. So that poses all these interesting theatrical problems. How do I get light onto the stage because I've got all this stuff hanging overhead? So I had to sit and work all the angles out to figure that out. I knew the visual image I wanted, but I needed to see how I could actually do it. So now I'm doing all this very crafty technical work. But in the end, after working on this and thinking about it and knowing the images in my mind, there's a little close-up of that, which is not very informative. I wind up putting all these stupid little symbols on the page. These are actually individual lights. And I have an intention for each one of those lights that help me create the final image. Because I haven't really designed anything yet. I'm just making a plan to design. I'm not actually designing as a lighting designer until I turn them on and decide intensity and color and distribution. And here I'm decided distribution and I've decided color, but not intensity. So all the little triangles are all the light bulbs that I talked about. All of the different lights are different fixture types and where they're located so that I can create the images that I want. And then you're going to find that the other thing we did with this was we made the floor completely out of what appears to be glass, and we lit the entire floor. So that's one of the first images. It looks so much nicer on the computer screen. Okay, so let's talk about the play a little bit more. Here's some of the things we brought to the table. Glass Menagerie usually winds up being Laura's play. It's very clearly written as Tom's play. And one of the things that both Preston and I talked about immediately was, this is Tom's play. It's very clearly Tom's play. And it's a memory play, and it's Tom's memory. But if you do this play in New York, and you're a producer, you're going to wind up casting a really famous actress to play Laura, and that's how you're going to sell tickets. But if you really want to do the play, it's Tom's play, so you got to center on Tom. So this is Tom after he gives that speech outside about St. Louis and the time, and this is what happened, and this is him stepping into what is the apartment space for the first time. He's just about to step really into the light, but you can see him becoming radiant in a murky background, hopefully. You can see the little light bulbs hanging down, and you also see these 4 large rectangular white squares. Well, since this was Tom's play, Tom wound up having a video camera that he carried with him almost the entire play. And was taking videos of what was going on that was being projected on that back wall back there, which is kind of a reddish color. And those 4 lights are lights that are common in TV and film, and we couldn't afford them, so our props person built them for me. But I wanted these 4 soft lights that just poured light onto the stage. I really like bright. Students tend to really like dark. I really like bright, and I like contrast between brightness and darkness. So that would be the opening. Here's when Tom first starts engaging. I hate that projector. You can come up and look at my computer anytime and see these images. So this is when he first starts engaging, and this is Amanda talking about Laura, and you can see the profile of her in the background, very large. And it's just there. Through all the machinations of my computer, that computer, the images aren't as quite as brilliant, as wonderful as they might be, but you get the idea. So here we are in the world of the play. All of a sudden it's become colder. That warmth of the memory, although it's a bad memory for him in some ways, has gone to this cool sort of whirl. So we've changed color and manipulated the color. Here's those lights very bright. This is the scene, if you know the play, where Amanda's talking on the phone trying to sell magazines. Then we find out how annoying she really is because the person she's selling magazines to is like, well, And in the background, Laura is always kind of hovering, dusting, cleaning. Her gramophone, or her father's gramophone, is on the floor there, and she spends a lot of time with it. It's glass. This is one of my favorite moments, and I have no qualm saying that this is stolen. Joseph Svoboda, a famous Czech, Eastern European, I'll do that, scenographer, did an opera of I'm blanking on it now.
If Will Pax was here, he'd nail it.
He'd nail it. But anyway, the main character gets chained down. And if you're chained down as a character on stage, it's kind of hard for the audience to see you. So what he did was he used a filmic technique to just capture the person and then reproject their image. Classical Greek, who gets chained down? Anyway, it'll come to me when the class is over. But here he's giving us monologue. And obviously Amanda and Laura in their background, we see his face very clearly, bigger than we can ever see in theater. So we see expression really closely. He's in this little white box. The floor was structured, the electrician hated me. They wanted like some pattern, and I kept telling them I can't give you a pattern for the floor until I see the blocking, because the blocking is going to tell me how to break down pattern on the floor. So the floor was often used to create space and rooms that are limiting, but give structure. Here, this is when Amanda comes back and finds out that Laura has not been going to typing class, and she's very disappointed. Tom is laying on the floor listening to it all. Amanda's over here with the floor lit in her section with a connection to Laura. Laura is there, of course, feeling remorse and horrible and all the things that Laura feels that make us attached to her. But if you notice, Tom has laid the camera down to take this very interesting shot of Laura's leg and the brace on her leg. We actually had her wear a brace. And you see just her leg and the brace in the background. The big white lights are all up pretty bright right now to flood it with light, to flood the stage with light. Now, at some point, yes, I played the trick of having them on. They didn't actually provide much light. They gave a feeling of atmosphere, a feeling of being in a studio, a feeling of being a voyeur into a process. And I was actually mimicking them with theatrical lights to give the highlights on them that appear to come from the big white lights. So I'm etching them out, and as El Greco would say, I'm trying to make them radiant in a murky background. And of course, the costume design obviously helps here, doesn't it? And they're all white. Everybody's wearing white. This is after the gentleman caller is going to come. And Amanda has just dressed Laura. And Laura's she stepped up on there, and Amanda was fussing, talked about her gentleman callers. And Amanda's about to step down and walk that line, that runway. You know, that idea of being on a runway, that idea of what most people, in the most ways we see runways, are people really showing off. And here's a person who doesn't want to show off in any possible way, being stuck on the runway and having to walk it. It's a very awkward 5 steps. And it was lit to make it more awkward. And, of course, he's filming this, and we're seeing close up her emotional reaction to this having to do this. This is the balcony scene with the gentleman caller, where we actually find out the gentleman caller, of course, has no interest in Laura, really, because he really has a girlfriend, and he has all these plans, and Tom has no plans. And before we're going to get to the dinner. So the balcony here is obviously just created, again, by making that square of light where we saw Tom earlier. And we have, of course, Amanda and Laura hovering in the background. This image, I'm sorry, it doesn't show up real well on this projector. Beautiful on my computer. I'm drooling over it right now. It's like eye candy to me. This is when Laura can't stand dinner and walks out of dinner and collapses. She just collapses in this puddle, this blue puddle of water in the middle of the stage. We did not do the dinner on stage. If you ever do this play, it's one of the most problematic parts of the show. You got all this stuff to deal with. So we actually did a video of it and projected the video of dinner happening on the rear wall. So the actors actually got a break for a moment. It's the gentleman caller scene. This is like always one of the hardest things to light as a lighting designer. The lights have been switched off because Tom didn't pay the electric bill, because he spent the money going to the movies. It's candle lit, and then you've got to get the people seen well enough, and well, hey, I had a light up floor. And here the light up floor became chaotic. It lost that idea of pattern and routine. And I used the light to break it up, to break up the floor in an odd way we've never seen before. And of course, the cameras downstage showing the candles up on the back as well as the candles here. They were pretty brightly uplit all the time, which was really great for me to be able to do. A lot of people came and took photographs of this section. So here's when, will you dance with me? Will you dance with me? And this is just before the unicorn breaks. So you can see them dancing in the background. You see the swirl of the skirt, of Laura's skirt. And Interestingly enough, they don't run into the stand and knock the little tiny piece of glass you can't see off the table. And, oh, you broke the unicorn. Now it's just a horsey, like every other horsey. Tom actually breaks it. Yes, we broke a unicorn every night. But he takes this horse that's, unicorn, that's big enough to hold in his hand, and snaps off that single horn every night. And that breaks the moment, right? That's when Laura wants to be normal. It's when all of the illusion breaks. The illusion here is created again by going into color. It's the use of color. And here we have the aftermath. And this is Tom saying, hey, this is what kind of happened here. My sister Laura, nothing really changed. I left. And all of a sudden we're back to this open space that makes it very clear and obvious the theater space that we're in. And we went back to this original look in terms of the warmth of the reds that surround the stage and the warmth of red in the background. Tom leaves the house, and he leaves, and in his mind's eyes, this is the image that he walks away with when he leaves them to go join the Merchant Marine. He's standing off and outside of the apartment. He's in this warm red space that was painted around the edge of the deck. He's giving this final monologue, and there's Laura and Amanda left in the space. So that's how I took all of those and created.
Road reinforces the concept
Stop,
that all famous
stop.
architects paid, cop, breed, and part.
Stop.
In the same
So that's how I did that play, using all of those things, putting together all of the little disparate parts that make up how I eventually have to get to a lighting design, and then putting them on the stage to have a specific meaning and understanding that hopefully the audience gets, or it doesn't get. If they don't get it, I'm not offended. They probably walked away with some emotion. Did they see what I see? Did they see the whole track of my life and Goya and how I interpreted Goya and how we did all that? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not going to write a whole thing to tell them about it, but if they walk away having experienced the emotion of the piece, I'm fine. Now I'm going to talk I'm going to run this little film, and I think we'll be done. This is the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It's a project they did a couple years ago. It's an architectural project. They built the Hall of Fame. They invited some people to light this band of light around it. And this is the post-production movie that I had to give to the Arts Council that I did. But here, as opposed to having a play, I had it building. And I think if you listen to it, you'll catch all the little catchphrases about how all of these disparate things come to the table and then get put together to do a finished product.
Glory Road reinforces the concept of the Hall of Fame's architects pay, cop, breed, and part. In the same spirit as the exterior ribbon and the curvilinear interior spaces that culminate in the centerpiece of the Great Hall, this program expresses the range of banking at the various Sprint Cup tracks. The entire show runs 14 and a half minutes and starts with the flatter road courses. On this edited version, you'll see the rich sunset red-orange of the ribbon or the track, and the cars circling the ribbon or track in a brighter red. And this represents a flatter track like Las Vegas. As we transition to the next track, the cars drag the new color with them on its final circuit. And the track will transition to a yellow color, while the car will maintain or actually move up the spectrum in a more orange color.
Thank you,
It
iMovie.
progresses in this manner and slowly makes its way through the entire visual spectrum. Here we'll see a movement into the green, which is the middle of the visual spectrum. And this is representing what would be a middle level track, sort of like the Michigan Speedway. Again, we're in the green area of the spectrum, and the show continues or progresses in this manner until we reach the most steeply banked track, which would be Bristol. That's represented in the blue end of the spectrum, which of course is the highest energy or the shortest wavelength and the steepest banking.
Yeah, it makes NASCAR sound really good with this background music, yeah? Go away, Google.
The Race to Get In is the first of the two programs that I created. I did this as a way to express the richness of the colors that are integral to the NASCAR experience, in combination with the thought that every driver on the circuit is really driving to create a legacy. The driver's career now leads to being inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Over the course of the 5-minute program, I've created a parade of car colors. Each driver is represented by his car's colors, encircling and
I did it
shading around the
numerically.
white ribbon. Each driver racing to move from the track to the ribbon into the Hall of Fame. Both programs can be seen in their entirety and are recorded on the DVD.
A white and black car. Black, no light. That was Junior's car. At the time. So, and that's also the end of what I have to talk about. But within that context, you'll hear me have said all these kinds of things in that little blurb, right? I talked about the wavelengths and all that. So I put together the color, I put together the architecture. Inside, if you've ever been to the NASCAR Hall of Fame, they start with a flat road and take it up to the actual banking at Bristol. And you walk up this, and they have this car that's defying gravity and stuck up on banking that's literally that steep. You can't walk up Bristol Motor Speedway in the corners. It's really crazy. I learned a lot about NASCAR. I learned a lot about IM Pay, which I knew about to begin with, and this building, and I put all those together. So I'm done. Any questions? Wait a second. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah?
All right, well, join me in thanking Norman. That's fantastic. Thank you. So in the spirit of the talk, I think hopefully what you guys are doing is exactly what he said there about, I think, stealing rather than borrowing, right? That is the ethos of this course, right? That you're looking for what are the principles. I hope, like you, when you're seeing these examples and stuff, you're just completely sucking it in and soaking in these principles and ways that you could translate what you're seeing. Just stunning stuff in the play, the lighting design for the play, I thought, and very, very rich in terms of ways to apply that to almost anything. So I think that's the kind of thing you guys want to be doing, is making those connections to your own work and just building on this sort of collection of principles and methods that we're trying to get after. I think also Norman said a bunch of amazing, interesting stuff on methodology. How all these things are combined, just a multitude of things. And I think everyone probably can relate to that. That there's an awful lot of different types of elements that go into what anybody does. And again, if you raise your mindfulness even a smidge, then you're raising the quality of your work, right? If you know the connections. Like it was nice where Norman finished. If an audience doesn't necessarily get all those El Greco references, that's totally okay. Right, but for you to know them, and for those to find their way into the work and increase the power of the work, I think is really how this goes. So now, just to give you a quick peek ahead, right? So go to the course website, check the assignment for the coming week. Again, it's going to ask you to create a blog, and the directions are really specific. So what I want to encourage you all to do is to breathe deep and read carefully. Because pretty much the assignments try to be fairly detailed. So read them carefully and have some fun with it. So this is the second composition you're making in this unit of study. You've created this contextual piece, in other words, a website as a kind of online context. Now you're creating a blog, a different type of online context. So you'll get firsthand experience for when you might choose for whatever project to make a blog or a website, that type of thing. But again, read the directions really clearly, really carefully, slowly, and just head off into this. So it's going to ask you to pull all of this together, everything from what you heard this morning, all the way back to where we started, first presentation. Okay? So with that, we're going to let you go, guys. See you next time.